What's going on, AD fam? Welcome to the video. I apologize, I'm a little hot and sweaty right now. We actually just sold the Grom and I decided to walk home. Yes guys, the Grom is gone. A lot of amazing memories on that bike, but honestly over the past couple years it's just collected dust and I hate to see something not get used. So I hope y'all understand. I might do a little recap video of the best memories that I had on that bike because it's really what started the channel. So we'll address that in a later date, but let's get to the point. If you're here, I'm sure you're wanting to hear about my top 5 things that I dislike about the 300L. And I'm sure the title of this video will say hate, and that's a pretty strong word because I definitely don't hate this bike, but there are some downfalls. Just like with anything, there's pros, there's cons. For the money, this is an amazing machine and I'm loving it so far. But let's go ahead and talk about these things that I hate. So I've had my 300L for a few months now. I've gotten to ride it in all different types of conditions, from gnarly trail riding to street riding to dual sporting. So I'd like to think that I have a pretty good judgment on the bike by now. And the biggest thing right away that I noticed is the ergonomics. This bike is marketed towards beginners, so I understand the emphasis on comfort, but the ergonomics are just not set up to ride aggressively. To start this out, I'm 6'4", so this might be a lot different for somebody that's average height. But for me, the bike is really hard to stand up with. The bike just feels cramped. Not only the sweep and the rise of the handlebars, that can be worked around, but the triple tree is almost too close to the rider. And obviously it's a street legal dual sport, but the angle of the forks is a little bit too raked out, and it definitely feels more like a street bike than a dirt bike. Now a lot of that can be worked around by adding an aftermarket set of handlebars, which is exactly what we're gonna do. I actually partnered up with Rocky Mountain, and we're gonna be doing a full Tusk handlebar setup complete with wraparound handguards, a 12-volt socket. It's gonna be one kick-ass cockpit after we're done, so stay tuned for that. But it's fine when you're just casually riding around town, doing some light trail use, which honestly is what this bike was designed to do. But I like to ride a little bit more aggressively, and it just feels a little cramped, and we're gonna try our best to get away from that feeling. Now I've went back and forth with number 2, but it is something that bothers me, and that is all of the road legal items. I'm talking the headlight, the turn signals, the tail light, everything just feels too bulky. It is too bulky. And they have to cheap out in some areas compared to bikes like the 450L. Like, I love the factory turn signals and tail light and headlight setup on the 450L. But the turn signals on this bike are cheap, flimsy plastic. They share the same turn signals as the Grom. And I get why they do that, but it's just not really trail friendly. I've already broken a turn signal. Granted, that was a pretty hard impact. But if it wouldn't have happened then, I'm sure it would have happened already in some other way, because I've dropped this bike several times. The 450L turn signals are super flexible, and you can literally crank on them in every direction and they don't break. So I wish that's something that they would have incorporated with this bike, but like I said, they got to cut corners somewhere to keep the cost down. I get it. The taillight and the headlight, they're just way too big. They did not have to be that big. There's a lot of space that could have been used better behind the headlight setup to make that fairing a little bit smaller, and that taillight looks like a small orb on the fender. It's just way too big. I will applaud Honda for the design of the whale tail. A couple screws, one connector for the license plate light, and you can take the entire tail off. And instead of spending $100, I'm gonna make my own license plate bracket. But I applaud Honda on the way that they designed that. It's like they were expecting people to take it off, which pretty much everybody does. I can't really complain about the mirrors because that's literally what every other street legal bike comes with. They have to be visible, they have to be functional. I think the 450L even has mirrors similar to that, so it is what it is. Oh yeah, not related to the street legal stuff, but a lot of people have commented on the front brake line that is obnoxiously routed right in front of your face. I don't know if that's just mine because I haven't really looked at other bikes, but I'll probably just get a shorter steel braided line and route it a little bit differently. That is annoying, trust me, I've noticed it. And it's super pronounced on video because I wear my GoPro on the chin, so it's literally like right in the view of the GoPro. But moving on to number 3. This was one of the things that might have been a deal breaker when I was looking for this bike, but I decided to give it a shot anyways, and that is the one-piece frame design. So a traditional bike has a separate subframe. The subframe literally unbolts from the main chassis, and Honda decided, in efforts to save weight, to make this a one-piece design. So the subframe is literally welded to the main chassis. Not a huge fan. If you were to get in a serious crash or loop the bike out, you obviously risk damaging the subframe, and now it's not going to be as easy as ordering a new one or even bending it it back would be easier if you could take it off the bike. Then again, I've also heard of 250L owners breaking their subframes by weighing it down with too much luggage, so I don't know if the one-piece design would help in that. I kind of think it would, so I guess maybe that would be a pro for some. Ultimately, I decided that it wasn't a deal breaker, and if something happens, well, I'll be the first to document it, but hopefully not. Speaking of that, I am in the process of ordering some gear for the back. I definitely need some racks, some luggage. I will probably go with the full Tusk system with the soft bags. It really just makes sense for a bike of that size, and you really just can't beat the value of that system. Tank bag as well, probably a handlebar bag, and I also want to get a GPS of some sorts. I do not want to rely on my phone. I plan on going out to some remote areas in the future, and I would really like a second option as far as navigation. So drop it down in the comments below if you recommend anything. I thought about the Trail Tech. I thought about going with a Garmin. So definitely let me know what you recommend, as I'm completely clueless and I've always relied on my phone in the past. Another tip, you can actually download regions on Google Maps, and this is what I've done in the past. So even if you don't have signal, sometimes you can still get the GPS to work if you have the area downloaded. Now, once again, I wouldn't directly rely on this, but I have in the past. It got me all the way out in remote areas of Colorado. I downloaded the whole state before I went, and I'm sure glad that I did. I will also probably go with a quad lock mount over the RAM mount just because I want something solid and secure that I don't have to worry about, and I think they have a wireless charging option, which is pretty sweet. So just dock your phone, it's going to stay charged. I think you guys will really be stoked on my handlebar setup, so make sure you have those notifications on. Number 4 on the list. So let's talk about the front end first. Now, I don't know why Honda decided to change this from the 250L, and if you can see, I actually have the 250L forks on my bike right now. That was so I could run the Warp 9 wheels. I'm getting off topic here, but the front axle. The front axle now requires an Allen instead of a wrench or socket. So when making a toolkit, now you have to carry an obnoxiously sized Allen head instead of before when you could just bring a wrench along. I don't know why Honda did this. It's pretty silly. I honestly think it's to push people to take their bikes to the dealerships to service. I also couldn't find just one, so I had to buy a whole pack for like $30, but that's one gripe that I do have, and especially with the pinch bolts and everything, it's just not the best design, but I will live. Moving back to the rear, and this is a bigger gripe that I have, it's the size of the swing arm, the space inside of the swing arm. And I first ran into this issue with the 250L when I ordered a 120 size tire. It was a Shinko cheater, so the lugs were a little bit bigger. At least I'm pretty sure that was a 120. I don't think it was a 130. Regardless, there's just not enough space to run a big tire like that. I had to take the rear mudguard off, and even then my chain was just too tight for the tire, so I actually ended up grinding some of the lugs down on my brand new cheater tire. But there was really nothing that I could do. I mean, my chain was like rubber band tight. Thankfully it loosened up fast enough to where I didn't damage anything. But I have a 140 tire sitting back there going on the KDX that I probably couldn't dream of running on the 300L. I'm actually running the Kenda Trackmaster right now, and that's a 120, and even that tire I had to have the axle pushed back as far as it would go, and the chain is way tighter than I would like. So that's kind of a bummer when it comes to choosing a tire, especially if you plan on running more aggressive tires. Let me know if anybody else has had this issue. Might just be me, but I kind of doubt it. The only real way to work around that would be to get a bigger chain. I just don't like that because you are so far back on the swing arm that the blocks are like almost out of the guides. But you gotta do what you gotta do, I guess. Once again, this bike is no enduro machine. Do I like to ride it like one? Yes, and I hope you're looking forward to that content. But that leads us to my final gripe with the 300L, and I think that's a pretty well-known thing, and that is the suspension. It is just way too soft from the factory. Even for lighter guys and girls, it's just too soft. And with the lack of adjustment, your only options are really to upgrade, and that can get expensive. So that is definitely something that I'm going to do with this bike. I just wish I didn't have to spend that extra money, but once again, you get what you pay for. They have to cheap out somewhere. Unfortunately, it had to be the suspension. Can you work around it? Yes. I mean, I've done all kinds of crazy things on my 250L with the stock suspension, but it's almost got me into some serious trouble numerous times. I've bottomed out, got squirrely, almost broke my wrist, but that's just because of the way that I ride. I would say for 90% of the people that own this bike, the suspension is fine, unless you really do want to get off of the beaten path and start doing some gnarly stuff, which can be done. So the suspension is something that I will will be upgrading in the future. I'll have full videos on that. We're also going to be rebuilding the suspension on the 250L. The rear shock is fine, but the fork seals need done badly and fresh fluid swapped in. So stay tuned for a video on that. I've actually never done fork seals before. I've always used the seal mate, kept them clean, and that's always worked for me. But at this point, so much fluid has leaked out of the 250L forks over time that it really needs a refresh. But other than those 5 things, I am loving this bike. It is fully what I expected it to be. I think it's a really good value for how much you pay for it. I like the fact that it's a street bike engine. I mean, it's straight out of the CB300. You can rack up thousands of miles on these bikes with little to no maintenance. I've seen people with well over 50,000 miles on original everything on these bikes in the forums, and that's what attracts me to these bikes. And like I said in the 450L video, it's better to have multiple bikes. So if you plan on doing some gnarly riding, some enduro stuff, I highly suggest just getting a dirt bike, because ultimately you probably will be let down if that's what you buy this bike to do. So just know what you're getting yourself into. This is not the highest performing bike by any means. It's far from it, but it's done everything that I've asked it to do and more. So leave your comments down below. What would you like to see next with the 300L? Like I said, we have the handlebar setup coming soon. We also have some dual sport tires to test out. I will be getting a seat concept seat for this bike. I really miss it from my 250L. You just can't beat them. They're so comfortable. Definitely worth the money in my opinion, and I highly suggest going with the gripper top rather than the all soft. Other than that, maybe a larger tank in the future, but my biggest priority is just to get some luggage on there, the handlebars, tires, and get this thing set up to have fun, because summer is slowly fading away and I want to get as much content with this bike and have some fun before winter. But I'll stop rambling. If you enjoy this video, please hit the like button. It really helps out the channel and pushes these videos to other people. Get me in that YouTube algorithm, baby. Let's get Adventure Daily to 100K. But if you made it this far, I really appreciate the support. It means a lot. Follow me on Instagram for daily updates. And until the next video, we'll see you then.
Holy Flex, are you okay?